Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. So this past Sunday, 25 of our young parishioners, ages 2 to 13, told and acted out the stories leading up to Christmas. We heard about Mary being visited by the angel Gabriel and asked if she would take part in God's crazy plan to come into the world as a newborn baby. We saw a confused and conflicted Joseph visited by an angel, told not to be afraid, but to take Mary as his wife and raise the child she was going to have. We saw Mary visit her cousin Elizabeth, who was also pregnant, with none other than John the Baptist. And at the end, we heard Joseph telling Mary that they had to begin a journey to Bethlehem because Caesar Augustus had ordered a census. I told the congregation that if they wanted to hear the rest of the story, they should come back tonight. I'm sure many people chuckled at that because, after all, everyone knows what happened next. Mary and Joseph come to Bethlehem. Baby Jesus is born. The shepherds are afraid. The angels sing. We heard it told. We sang about it again tonight. The story of Christmas. But then we also just heard from the Gospel of John, which is probably not the story you were expecting to hear this evening, because John tells the Christmas story very differently. John's story of Jesus' birth begins not in Bethlehem, but in eternity. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In the beginning, John deliberately echoes the opening words of Genesis, where we hear God speak creation into being. Darkness is over the face of the deep, and then God says, "Let there be light," and there is light. By echoing that language, John reminds us that Jesus, the light, was present from the very beginning, part of God's creative, life-giving force. This little baby that we welcome into the world tonight is the same God who created heavens and the earth. The one whom eternity cannot contain became flesh and blood. I know John's gospel can feel baffling, especially when set against the simplicity of the manger. But John is telling the same story, just through a different lens. And in fact, John tells the whole story in just 9 words. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. The Greek word that John uses to say that we translate lived among us or dwelled among us actually means to pitch a tent. God loved us so much that God came and pitched a tent among us. Eugene Peterson, in the Message translation of the Bible, translates it even more plainly. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. Not a palace, not a fortress, a tent, a neighborhood. This is the wonder of Christmas. God didn't remain distant or abstract. God came close enough to be held, close enough to touch and be touched. Tonight, we remember that God knows what it is like to be cradled in a mother's arms, to grow up with an earthly father who worked with his hands. Jesus knew joy and grief, friendship and loss, anger and worry. He loved as humans loved and suffered as humans suffer. And tonight's story didn't end some 2,000 years ago. God didn't become flesh, dwell among us, and then pack up his tent and go home. The thing about God pitching a tent in the neighborhood, God does that again and again and again. Christmas is not just about remembering something that happened once long ago in Bethlehem. It's about recognizing something that keeps happening still. God is always moving into the neighborhood, into real neighborhoods, with real people, real worries, real grief, real joy, real exhaustion, real fear, and real hope. It's why we hear from the prophet Isaiah on Christmas night, too. Those of you who were here on Sunday heard a very prophetic 8-year-old reinterpret the words of Isaiah. I'm not sure I will do it justice, but Antonio is traveling for the holidays. I told them that God would send a child, yes, a child who would grow up to show us what God's love looks like. I said this child would bring joy where there was sadness, peace where there was fighting, and hope where people felt afraid. Pay attention, watch for the light. Hope is coming. Isaiah wasn't speaking to people who had it all figured out. No, he was speaking to people who were tired of waiting, people who were afraid, people who wondered if God had forgotten them. Isaiah was speaking to people living in darkness, political turmoil, displacement, fear, uncertainty, people who were waiting for hope and weren't sure when or if it would arrive. Perhaps that sounds a little like some of you. Sometimes we too find ourselves waiting for hope, watching for the light. And if we're honest, sometimes it feels a little bit hard. We live in a world where the 24/7 news cycle can feel overwhelming, where divisions feel deep, where grief touches our lives more often than we would perhaps like. Some of us came here tonight carrying private sorrow, unanswered prayers, fear for our children or our parents, for our community, for ourselves. Some of us are tired of watching and waiting and hoping. And yet, Isaiah's voice echoes through the ages, reminding us to pay attention, to watch for the light. Hope is coming. Tonight, after we share the bread and wine in communion, a beloved tradition will unfold. You will each be given a candle, and as we prepare to sing Silent Night, Nate and James, our acolytes, will come forward with lit tapers and light the candle of the first person in each pew. And then the light will be shared, one candle at a time. Adults receiving the light from children, children receiving the lights from adults, strangers turning toward one another, hands steadying hands. And the light will spread, not all at once, not dramatically, but patiently, person by person. No single flame drives out the darkness, but together, enough light will come to see each other's faces. This is not just a tradition. This is a living symbol of how God comes into the world, not by overpowering the darkness, but by trusting people to carry light for one another. Not by skipping over generations or separating people, but by binding us together. Children and elders, longtime members and first-time visitors, family, friends, strangers. This is what it looks like when God pitches a tent among us. And when we sing Silent Night, when the sanctuary is dark and the only light comes from those candles, you might feel something settle in your chest, a stillness, a tenderness, a sense that you are part of something bigger and older and deeper than yourself. Hold on to that. Because when we leave this place tonight, the world will still be the world. Humans will still be humans. There will be joy and celebration and meltdowns and fear and fun and worry and celebrations and grief. So take the light that you receive tonight, turn toward one another, and pass it on. For the Word became flesh and lived among us, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Pay attention. Watch for the light. Hope is here. In the name of the one who loves us and birthed us into being, amen.